20 years ago, I walked into a moment that still claws at my mind, a moment where innocence nearly cost me everything. My name doesn't matter. Back then, I was just a 20-year-old mother, naive, fragile, and so painfully unaware of the shadows that lurk in broad daylight. Covington, Kentucky, in the summer of 2005, was a place where the heat clung to your skin like a warning, and the streets whispered danger to anyone foolish enough to listen. Was that fool? And this is the story of how I survived a ride that reeked of death. The sun burned high that day, scorching the cracked sidewalks of a neighborhood where hope seemed to wither. I wore shorts and a tank top, the kind of clothes that screamed summer, but drew the wrong kind of attention. At barely 100 pounds, I looked like a wisp of a girl, easily mistaken for someone I wasn't, someone men leered at, someone they shouted at from passing cars. It happened too often, those catcalls and crude gestures. But I'd learned to keep my head down, my steps quick, as I made my way to the daycare to pick up my son. He was my anchor, my reason to keep moving through a life that had already bruised me too many times. Halfway down the street, the air shifted. A truck roared past, its engine growling like a predator. It slowed, then circled back, tires screeching against the asphalt. Inside were men, 4, maybe 5, their faces blurred by distance, but their laughter sharp, cutting through the humid air. They shouted things I tried to ignore, words that made my skin crawl. My heart quickened, a frantic drumbeat in my chest. I clutched my bag tighter, eyes fixed on the road ahead, praying they'd lose interest. But the truck turned again, its shadow looming closer, their voices growing louder, more insistent. Keep walking, I told myself. Just keep walking. But fear was a weight slowing my steps, making every breath feel stolen. I was passing a gas station, its neon sign flickering in the daylight, when a sleek black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and a man leaned out, not much older than me, maybe 25, with a face that could have belonged in a magazine. His smile was disarming, his voice smooth, like he'd practiced this moment. "Hey, you look like you could use a ride," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Those guys back there don't seem too friendly." I glanced at the truck still idling a block away, its occupants watching like vultures. My instincts screamed to keep moving, but his car was clean, polished to a mirror shine, and he didn't look like the men in the truck. He looked safe. Stupid, stupid girl, I'd later think. But in that moment, I nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice barely audible, and climbed into the passenger seat. The car smelled of leather and something else. Something faint, metallic, like rust left to fester. I brushed it off, settling into the seat, my bag on my lap, like a shield. "Where you headed?" he asked, pulling onto the road. "Just a mile down this street," I said, pointing straight ahead. "I'm picking up my son from daycare." He nodded, but instead of going straight, he turned left the wrong direction. My stomach twisted, but his voice was calm. "Just need to turn around up here," he said, flashing that smile again. I swallowed my unease, telling myself I was overreacting. "He's just confused. I thought he'll get me there." We started talking, or rather I did. He asked questions, simple ones at first, where I was, from what I did. I don't know why I opened up, but the words spilled out, like they'd been waiting to escape. I told him about escaping a violent relationship, about staying at a women's shelter nearby, about how every move I made was watched, recorded, because the shelter staff knew how easy it was for women like me to vanish. "I have to pick up my son soon," I said, glancing at my watch. "They'll notice if I'm late." His eyes flicked to me, then back to the road, but he didn't say anything. Looking back, that silence was the first crack in his mask. The car was too clean. Not a speck of dust, not a stray receipt. Nothing to suggest it was lived in. It felt staged, like a set piece, meant to deceive. And that smell, it was growing stronger, no longer faint, but heavy cloying, like meat left to rot in a locked room. My nose wrinkled, and I turned to look at the back seat, expecting to see a forgotten grocery bag, maybe spoiled food. But the back seat was as pristine as the front, the black leather gleaming under the sunlight, streaming through the windows. "What is that?" I thought, my pulse quickening. It wasn't just a bad smell. It was wrong, unnatural, like something that didn't belong in a car this perfect. "Do you smell that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He shrugged, eyes fixed on the road. "Probably something I forgot to take out," he said, his tone too casual, like he was reciting a line. I frowned, leaning closer to the back seat, searching for the source. Nothing. Not a crumb, not a stain. The smell hit me again, thicker now, wrapping around me like a fog. It was the kind of stench that made your throat tighten, your eyes water, the kind that whispered death, even if you didn't know the word for it yet. "Something's wrong," my mind screamed, but I was too young, too trusting to listen. He took another turn, this one sharper, leading us down a side street I didn't recognize. "This isn't the way," I said, my voice trembling now. "You said it was straight down the road." He glanced at me, his smile gone, replaced by something colder, harder. Shortcut. He said the word clipped final. My heart pounded each beat, a warning I couldn't ignore. The shelter's rules echoed in my head. Never go anywhere without telling someone. Never trust a stranger. I'd broken both, and now I was here in a car that smelled like a grave, with a man whose eyes no longer looked kind. Stay calm, I told myself, gripping my bag until my knuckles whitened. I really need to get to the daycare, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. They're expecting me. If I'm not there soon, they'll call the shelter, and people will look for me. I didn't know if it was true, but I needed him to believe it. His jaw tightened, just for a second, and then he nodded. We're almost there, he said, but his voice was different now, like he was weighing something, calculating. The smell was unbearable now, a living thing pressing against my skin, filling my lungs with every breath. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying not to gag. What is that smell? I asked again, my voice rising, desperate. He didn't answer. This time, just kept driving his hands tight on the wheel. I looked at him, really looked, and saw it, a flicker of something in his eyes. Not fear, not anger, but hunger. It was gone as quickly as it came, but it was enough. Get out, my mind screamed. Get out now, but I didn't. I couldn't. The car was moving, the doors locked, and I was a 20-year-old girl who'd never learned how to fight. So I sat there, frozen, as the streets blurred past, each one taking me further from safety. You're going to die, a voice whispered in my head. Not mine, but something darker, older. You're going to disappear, and no one will ever find you. I thought of my son, his tiny hands, his laugh, and something in me snapped. Stop the car, I said, my voice louder than I expected. He didn't look at me, didn't slow down. I said, stop, I shouted, banging my fist on the dashboard. He flinched just slightly, and then, to my shock, he pulled over. We were back on the main road, the daycare just a block away. He didn't say a word as I fumbled with the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. I stumbled out the humid air, a relief after the suffocating stench of the car. I didn't look back, didn't wait to see if he'd follow. I ran my sandals, slapping against the pavement, until I reached the daycare, bursting through the doors, gasping for breath. I was safe. My son was there, smiling, oblivious to the terror I'd just escaped. The staff didn't ask questions, didn't notice the sweat on my brow or the tremble in my hands. I held my son close, his warmth grounding me, pulling me back from the edge of panic. The man didn't follow, didn't call out. His car was gone when I looked outside, like he'd never existed. But he did exist. And so did that smell. Months later, in a different city, a different life, I smelled it again. I was walking past a butcher shop, the door open, and the stench hit me like a memory I'd buried. It wasn't just rotting meat, it was death, unmistakable, undeniable. I froze my mind, reeling back to that car, that man, that moment, when I'd been so close to something I couldn't name. I read about bodies, later, about how they smell when they're hidden, decomposing in secret. And I knew with a certainty that made my blood run cold, that I'd been in the presence of something evil. Why did he let me go? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. Maybe it was what I said about the shelter, about being missed, about people looking for me. Maybe he saw something in my eyes, a spark of fight he hadn't expected. Or maybe he just wasn't ready to cross that line, not yet. But I know this. I was lucky, luckier than I deserved to be. That car, that smell, that man, they're etched into me, a scar I'll carry forever. And every time I walk alone, every time I smell something faintly wrong, I'm 20 again, sitting in a spotless car that reeked of death, wondering if I'll make it out alive. In the sweltering summer of 1993, my family embarked on a journey to redefine our lives. My parents, David and Margaret, had poured their savings into a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a far cry from the noisy city apartment we'd outgrown. My older sister, Sarah, 16, and perpetually exasperated my older brother, James, 12, and bursting with curiosity. And I, Benjamin, an 8-year-old dreamer, were eager for the adventure. 2 younger sisters would join us later, but for now, we were a family of 5, united by the promise of a new beginning. The house was a spectacle, standing in stark contrast to its surroundings. The neighborhood was a sea of single-story bungalows, each with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and identical picket fences. Our home, however, was a 2-story giant boasting 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a beauty salon, and a workshop attached to the garage. Its white siding shimmered under the sun, but its tall, narrow windows seemed to follow us as we unloaded boxes from our battered minivan. The closing took place in a cramped real estate office, the air heavy with the smell of stale coffee. Mr. Grayson, the seller, was a lean man with piercing eyes and a smile that felt more like a mask. As the final papers were signed, my mother, always thorough, posed a question that shifted the room's atmosphere. Has anyone ever died in this house? Mr. Grayson's smile tightened his gaze, locking onto hers. worried about restless spirits. His tone was teasing, but there was a coldness beneath it, a hint of something unspoken. My mother's hand trembled, her pen pausing mid-air. My father, quick to ease the tension, chuckled and steered the conversation to property taxes, but the question hung like a shadow. We left as homeowners, but my mother's unease was palpable. Moving day was a blur of activity. Boxes stacked in the foyer, furniture shuffled into place, and the scent of fresh paint mingling with dust. The house was grand, with soaring ceilings and gleaming hardwood floors, but an odd stillness pervaded, as if it were holding its breath. My parents assigned bedrooms, and I was given the last room on the left, upstairs, a spacious corner room with a view of the woods. That first night, I lay in bed, the darkness heavy around me. The room felt vast, oppressive, and a prickling sensation crawled up my spine as if eyes were watching from the corners. Unable to bear it, I fled to James's room, pleading to share his space. He rolled his eyes, but agreed, and we settled into the last room on the right, a smaller sanctuary that felt less exposed. The neighborhood was a quintessential slice of 1990s suburbia. Kids raced on bikes, neighbors chatted over hedges, and the air hummed with the rhythm of daily life. But our house drew attention, its size and uniqueness, a topic of hushed conversation. Belonged to Mr. Grayson's wife, a neighbor remarked, her voice low. She ran the salon. Strange man, that Grayson. A week after moving in, my parents proposed a walk to meet the neighbors. We locked the front door, turned off every light, and set out into the evening. The neighborhood's 5 streets wound through rows of identical homes, their windows glowing warmly. We exchanged greetings, collected homemade pies, and felt the embrace of our new community. As twilight deepened, we headed back, our chatter fading as the house came into view. Every light blazed, casting an unnatural glow, and the front door stood wide open, its frame a dark void. My mother gripped my arm, her voice sharp. Stay here. My father, his face taut, grabbed a flashlight from the minivan and approached the house. Sarah, James, and I waited, our hearts pounding, as he vanished inside. After an agonizing wait, he returned, shaking his head. It's empty. My mother called the police, who searched every room, their beams cutting through the darkness. They found no signs of intrusion, no footprints, no missing items. Nothing amiss. Could have been a faulty lock, an officer suggested, but my father's expression was grim. We'd checked the door twice. That night, as I lay beside James, the house felt alive, its walls pulsing with secrets. The open door wasn't an oversight. It was a message, a sign that we weren't alone. The days that followed were a mix of normalcy and unease. My parents threw themselves into settling in hanging pictures and planting flowers, but the house's presence loomed. I began to notice small things. A chill in certain rooms, a faint reflection in the hallway mirror that didn't match my movements. My mother grew quieter, her eyes darting to the windows at odd moments. The neighborhood, with its friendly faces, felt like a facade hiding something darker beneath. One evening, as I passed the upstairs hallway, I caught my reflection in the mirror at the end of the corridor. For a moment, it seemed to linger, its edges blurred, as if someone else stood behind me. I turned, but the hallway was empty. The house was watching, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it knew more about us than we knew about it. The open door incident left a mark, but my parents pressed forward, determined to make the house our own. My mother arranged furniture with meticulous care, while my father tackled the overgrown lawn. Sarah James and I explored the neighborhood, trying to ignore the chill that followed us. To solidify our place in the community, my parents planned a welcome party, transforming the front yard into a festive scene. Balloons swayed on the porch, the grill smoked with burgers, and a table groaned under the weight of potluck dishes. Neighbors arrived, their laughter filling the air, but the house stood silent, its windows reflecting the fading light like watchful eyes. Among the guests was Mr. Bill, our next-door neighbor, a burly man with a weathered face and a penchant for flannel shirts. He hesitated at the porch, his eyes scanning the house as if it might strike. After a long pause, he stepped inside, settling on the living room couch with a beer, his posture stiff. I caught him glancing at the staircase, his grip tightening on the bottle, as if bracing for something unseen. The party hummed with energy, but I retreated to the playroom, a small space off the living room, where James and I kept our prized possessions, a Sega console, a small TV, and my hamster, Peanut. Feeling restless, I let Peanut roam in his plastic ball, watching as he rolled across the hardwood. The ball veered into the living room, stopping near Mr. Bill's feet. His face paled, his eyes fixed on the ball with an intensity that unnerved me. My mother, noticing his unease, approached. "Everything okay, Bill?" His voice was low, strained. "If that ball moves again, I'm leaving, and I won't return." The room hushed, all eyes on him. At that moment, Peanut surged forward, the ball darting across the floor. Mr. Bill leapt up, his beer spilling, and fled out the front door, leaving a stunned silence. The guests chuckled, assuming he was startled by the hamster, but I saw the terror in his eyes. It wasn't Peanut. He feared it was something the house had shown him. My mother tried to explain the next day, assuring Mr. Bill it was just a pet, but he refused to step foot inside again. He'd meet us in the driveway or at the mailbox, his gaze avoiding the house. His reaction lingered in my mind, a clue to a puzzle I couldn't yet solve. Weeks later, a conversation in the front yard unveiled the house's dark history. My mother was pruning roses when Mrs. Eleanor, the elderly woman across the street, approached. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight bun, her eyes sharp with knowledge. "You've heard about the house, haven't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother frowned. "Heard what?" Mrs. Eleanor glanced at the house, her expression grave. "2 women died there, Mr. Grayson's wife and daughter. Cancer took them years apart." My mother's hands froze the pruning shears, trembling. Mrs. Eleanor continued her words, deliberate. "Grayson was an odd man. Built hidden rooms in that house behind bookshelves under stairs. Some say he stored firefighting gear, axes, hoses, in a secret compartment by the staircase. Others say he kept a safe upstairs, sealed behind a wall." The revelation shook my mother. Determined to uncover the truth, she invited Mrs. Eleanor over to explore. They began in the computer room, where a bookshelf stood, flush against the wall, its edges sealed with screws. In the laundry room, they found its back hinged like a door leading to a narrow space beneath the stairs. Dust coated the floor, and cobwebs draped the walls, but the space was empty. Its purpose, a mystery. Upstairs in the room, meant to be mine, they discovered a faint crack in the wall, tracing the outline of a sealed door. Mrs. Eleanor claimed it concealed Mr. Grayson's safe, a relic of his secretive nature. These findings deepened my mother's fear. She began watching talk shows about the supernatural, absorbing every word of psychics like Sylvia Brown. The house, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a maze of secrets, each hidden corner a reminder of its past inhabitants. I started noticing things too, reflections in mirrors that seemed to move independently, a faint pressure in the air when I passed the staircase. The house wasn't just a building. It was a presence observing us waiting. One night, as I brushed my teeth in the upstairs bathroom, I glanced at the mirror and froze. My reflection stared back, but its eyes seemed darker, its mouth curved in a way mine wasn't. I blinked, and it was gone, but the memory lingered, a quiet warning from the house. By the time I reached 4th grade, the house's peculiarities were undeniable. Doors opened and closed on their own, their movements slow and deliberate, as if guided by an unseen force. Objects shifted. A glass left on the kitchen counter appeared on the dining table. A book moved from the shelf to the floor. My father, ever practical, attributed it to drafts or carelessness. But my mother grew increasingly withdrawn, her eyes shadowed with fear. I often found her in the family van parked in the driveway, a portable TV glowing with talk shows, her lap cluttered with tabloid magazines. "Why are you always out here?" "Mom," I asked one day, my voice small. She forced a smile. "It's quieter, Ben," but her trembling hands betrayed her. The house terrified her. The disturbances grew more frequent. At night, I'd catch glimpses of movement in the hallway mirror, as if someone stood just out of sight. James and my mother shared their own experiences. Hair tugged by invisible fingers, a sudden push on the stairs. My mother confessed she spent her days in the van to avoid being alone in the house, her fear overwhelming her. I oddly remained untouched. The entities, whatever they were, seemed to ignore me, and I felt a strange mix of relief and resentment. Why was I spared? Did the house deem me unworthy of its attention? At 12, I faced a darkness of my own. One afternoon, while my mother, James, and Emily were at the store, I was consumed by a despair I couldn't explain. In a moment of desperation, I took a belt from my closet and tried to end my life. As the world faded, a cold presence enveloped me, and I awoke on the floor. The belt snapped in two. Something had intervened, but its nature eluded me. When my family returned, my mother noticed the marks on my neck. "What happened, Ben?" I lied, my voice steady. My shirt caught on a nail in the attic. Her eyes lingered, but she didn't press. The incident piqued James's curiosity, and we ventured into the attic in the closet of my intended bedroom. Among dusty toys, we found a plaster mold of teeth, yellowed and unsettling. We left it there, unwilling to dwell on its significance. My mother's obsession with the paranormal intensified. She quoted Sylvia Browne, insisting that horror movies invited evil into the home. One day, James and I found our father's VHS tapes, The Exorcist Poltergeist, in the trash. "Sylvia says they're dangerous," my mother declared. We smuggled them back to our room, hiding them under the bed. Her fears extended to mundane things. When she noticed we'd left Christmas lights up past the holidays, she grew frantic. "Sylvia says it's bad luck," she said, her voice trembling. James, exasperated, snapped, "This house is already cursed. I feel hands in my hair at night, and I see things in the mirrors." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "It happens to me too," she admitted. "I've been pushed on the stairs. That's why I stay in the van. I can't be here alone." Her words broke me. The house was destroying her, and I was powerless to stop it. As the years passed, my parents' marriage unraveled, and my father moved out, leaving us in the house's rip. My mother turned to alcohol and pills her fear morphing into addiction. One night, as I sat in the computer room, I noticed the mirror on the wall. My reflection seemed to flicker, its edges blurred as if someone stood behind me. I turned, but the room was empty. The house was playing with me, its presence growing bolder. The house's grip tightened as the years passed. In June 2007, a fire ravaged the downstairs, leaving blackened walls and the stench of smoke. The fire department deemed the cause undetermined, but rumors of arson swirled. A month later, my mother succumbed to her addiction, passing away in the hospital from liver failure. Her death left a void, the house a hollow reminder of our fractured family. James and I returned to the ruins to salvage what we could. In the attic of my would-be bedroom, I felt compelled to dig through the insulation. There, hidden beneath layers of fiberglass, I found a Ouija board, a check from Mr. Grayson to an ambulance service, and a photograph of two women, likely his wife and daughter, lost to cancer. James, caught in his emo phase, framed the Ouija board check and photo, hanging them above his bed. I warned him against it, but he was drawn to the mystery. Life moved on the house, a fading memory, until a chance encounter, years later, brought the past into sharp focus. Through Sarah, I met Michael Mr. Grayson's grandson at a local dirt track race. Over beers, I mentioned the house and the Ouija board. Michael's face paled. "That's mine," he said. "I bought it as a kid, trying to reach my grandmother, Eleanor, and my Aunt Margaret." The names hit me like a thunderbolt. Years earlier, in the computer room, I'd named the house's entities Eleanor and Margaret, a choice I'd thought random. Michael confirmed the women in the photo were his relatives, both taken by cancer. He asked for the board and items, and we returned them, shaken by the coincidence. James and I have shared this story with others, but few believe us. We've made peace with that, knowing the truth we lived through. The house is gone, reduced to ashes, but its shadow lingers. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, I catch a glimpse of movement in a mirror and wonder if Eleanor and Margaret are still watching their presence etched into the fabric of my life. In the winter of 2002, or perhaps early 2003, my search and rescue colleague and climbing partner, Jake, and I embarked on a journey through the desolate stretches of Ojai Valley. The exact highway we traveled remains a mystery. Rural routes in that region rarely boasted clear signage, especially on the less trodden paths. We were venturing toward an unfamiliar destination, choosing a new route that promised adventure. The air in our rugged pickup truck buzzed with anticipation, tempered by the quiet unease of navigating uncharted territory. Jake, a medical student with a knack for staying calm under pressure, drove while I scanned the horizon, noting landmarks for our return. The highway was a narrow, two-lane affair, unidirectional, with no exits or on-ramps for miles. Ojai Valley's landscape unfolded around us. Rolling hills cloaked in brittle, frost-kissed grass. Sparse trees clawing at the overcast sky, and a pervasive stillness that seemed to swallow sound. We had just passed a weathered sign reading Ojai Valley, the only marker in what felt like an eternity of asphalt. A concrete overpass loomed ahead, its shadow stark against the gray light, but no access roads connected it to our path. It stood isolated, a silent sentinel over the empty road. Our conversation about upcoming climbing routes halted abruptly when a jarring sight emerged. A small red hatchback sat stranded in the slow lane, its front end obliterated as if it had collided with an immovable force. The hood was crumpled, the windshield shattered, and blood stained the passenger window in grim streaks. Debris littered the pavement, clothes, papers, a thermos, even a child's stuffed toy scattered, as though the car's contents had been violently ejected. 2 pet carriers lay among the wreckage, their doors ajar, but no movement stirred within. The scene was eerily still, devoid of other vehicles or signs of life. Jake slowed the truck, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. "What in God's name happened here?" he muttered, his voice low. I had no answer. As wilderness first responders, we were trained to handle crises, broken limbs in remote canyons, hypothermia in snowstorms. But this was different. The devastation suggested a catastrophic impact, yet the road bore no evidence of another vehicle. No tire marks, no animal remains. The hatchback, positioned directly beneath the overpass, looked as though it had slammed into an invisible barrier at high speed. We pulled over, keeping a cautious distance, the truck's engine idling. The silence of Ojai Valley pressed against us, broken only by the faint hum of our vehicle. I studied the wreckage, noting details. The car's tires were intact, ruling out a blowout. All doors, save the rear hatch, remained closed. The hatch likely forced open by the sheer force of the collision. Blood pooled inside, confirming the driver's fate. A figure slumped over the steering wheel, motionless, the seatbelt still fastened. The sight churned my stomach, but a deeper unease gnawed at me. Something about the scene felt wrong, unnatural. Should we get out and check? I asked, though every instinct screamed against it. Jake shook his head, his eyes fixed on the car. That driver's gone. And this doesn't feel right. His words mirrored my thoughts. Despite our training, neither of us moved. The isolation, the absence of any logical explanation, and the sheer violence of the wreck rooted us in place. We scanned the surroundings, hoping for clues, but found none. No skid marks. No debris from another vehicle. No blood trails indicating an animal strike. It was as if the hatchback had met an unseen colossal force. Minutes ticked by as we grappled with our options. Cell phones were useless. No signal in this remote stretch. The nearest exit could be dozens of miles away. We debated driving on to report the incident, but the weight of the moment held us. Then, a low rumble pierced the silence, growing louder until it vibrated through the truck. A military helicopter, painted in matte green with indistinct markings, crested the horizon. It hovered directly above the wreck, its blades slicing the air. My pulse quickened. "What the hell is this?" I said, my voice barely audible. A rope descended from the chopper, and a uniformed figure rappelled to the ground with practiced precision. Carrying a compact case, the soldier moved swiftly, inspecting the wreckage. Within moments, a military truck rolled down from the overpass, a route we hadn't seen or thought possible. More personnel emerged, securing the area with chilling efficiency. Barricades went up, and the soldier from the helicopter signaled to the chopper, which ascended and vanished beyond the hills. Jake and I exchanged a glance, wordless, but unanimous. We needed to leave. He eased the truck forward, steering wide of the cordoned-off wreck. As we drove, the scene replayed in my mind. The blood, the debris, the inexplicable damage. What had the hatchback hit? And why was the military responding so swiftly in a place where no one else seemed to exist? The questions churned unanswered. Miles later, we found a faint cell signal and called the local police. The dispatcher listened to our account, but offered no recognition of the incident, promising only to look into it. In the years that followed, Jake and I scoured the internet, chasing any mention of the crash, a news article, a forum post, anything. We found nothing. The Ojai Valley incident remained a ghost unacknowledged by the world. We revisited the story during late-night campfires, dissecting every detail. Had the car struck something otherworldly? Was the military covering up a classified operation? The pet carriers haunted me, most empty, yet heavy with unspoken tragedy. The memory of that red hatchback, broken beneath the overpass, lingered like a scar. Ojai Valley had shown us something, a puzzle without pieces, a truth just out of reach, and it would never let us go. The summer sun cast golden rays over the base camp, where backpacks stood in neat rows, ready for a 4-week journey into the wild. I was a wilderness guide and therapist, working for a program that blended nature with emotional healing. Despite the criticism wilderness therapy often faced, our program stood out for its compassion and ethical approach. We took children, mostly from affluent families, some with famous parents, into the heart of nature, guiding them through therapy sessions under starlit skies. Yet we also offered scholarships for kids from less privileged backgrounds, ensuring everyone had a chance to heal. Our group of 12 kids was a mix of backgrounds, each carrying their own struggles. They learned to cook with basic supplies: rice beans, cheese, and peanut butter, and built shelters from a simple 4x6 tarp using knots rocks and their walking sticks. As guides, we slept under the stars with just sleeping bags and bivy sacks, embracing the rawness of the wilderness. Every night, we gathered around a campfire where the kids shared their fears, dreams, and stories, slowly unraveling the weight they carried. Among them was a boy who called himself Cocoa Puff. At 12, he was tiny, looking no older than 8, with bright, intelligent eyes that held a quiet sadness. He came from a challenging background, placed with a new family, after his mother could no longer care for him due to mental health struggles and hoarding. He had spent time in juvenile facilities and mental health centers, places that left him feeling lost. His scholarship to our program was a lifeline, a chance to find himself in the vastness of the wild. When I first met him, his resilience struck me. Despite his small frame, he carried a sharp mind and a determination that belied his age. He spoke proudly of his role at home, where he'd walk to the store with meager funds to buy food for his siblings, always choosing items based on nutritional value. His favorite was a certain breakfast cereal, which he swore contained 14 essential nutrients. He said it with such earnestness that I couldn't help but smile, inwardly charmed by his sincerity. The first days in the wilderness tested everyone. The kids learned to cook over open fires, their meals simple but sustaining. They struggled with their tarps, at first fumbling with knots until their shelters stood firm. The boy, with his small hands and quick mind, mastered the task faster than most. His shelter was modest, but sturdy, a testament to his ability to adapt. Each child carried a backpack weighing between 40 and 60 pounds, filled with personal gear and shared supplies. For him, whose weight barely reached 65 pounds, the load was too much. He had health challenges, possibly linked to prenatal conditions, so I redistributed his share to stronger kids, or carried it myself. He never complained, though. When faced with a steep hill, he'd pause, look up, and declare that he could climb it if he had his favorite cereal, citing its nutritional benefits. The group chuckled, and I bit back a laugh, admiring his unshakable optimism. Nights around the campfire were where he began to shine. He spoke of his siblings, his voice heavy with longing for them. He shared stories of his trips to the store carefully, reading labels to stretch their budget. His maturity stunned me, a 12-year-old who had shouldered so much. As the days passed, he grew more comfortable, his laughter ringing out more often, blending with the rustle of leaves and the crackle of the fire. The final week brought the solo challenge, a rite of passage. We placed each child in a secluded spot about a mile from base camp to spend 3 days alone with their thoughts and the wilderness. The locations were chosen based on their skills, and for him, we selected a spot near a swift-moving stream. Despite his size, he had proven himself capable, his intelligence and resourcefulness shining through. The stream was a challenge to reach its cold waters, rushing over slippery rocks. It had already claimed one of our tracking poles, swept away in its current. As the lowest-ranking guide, I was tasked with checking on him daily, wading through the stream while clinging to rocks for balance. I didn't mind. Something about him made me want to ensure he was safe, that he was thriving in this test of independence. During these check-ins, I stayed hidden, observing from a distance to respect his solitude. We had a system, a small mailbox made of stones or wood, where kids could leave notes if they needed help. He never left a note. He seemed at ease, as if the forest had welcomed him as one of its own. One morning, as I approached his site, I froze. A hawk, its wings broad and eyes piercing, perched on the walking stick that anchored his tarp. A few feet away, he sat on a rock, speaking softly to the bird. His voice was calm, almost melodic, as if sharing a secret. The hawk tilted its head, unafraid, its gaze fixed on the boy. I watched, hidden behind a tree, for nearly half an hour, captivated by the scene unfolding before me. The next day brought an even more astonishing sight. A doe and her newborn fawn stood near his shelter. The fawn, barely steady on its legs, rested just steps from his tarp, while the doe grazed nearby, unperturbed. He sat cross-legged, watching them with a gentle smile. He made no move to approach, simply existing in their presence, as if he belonged to their world. In all my years in the wilderness, I had never seen such a profound connection between a person and wild creatures. Even the camp dogs, brought by 2 therapists, were drawn to him. Against the rules, they sought him out each night, curling up beside his shelter or resting their heads near his feet. We tried to call them back, but their loyalty to him was unshakable. They sensed something in him, a quiet magic that transcended explanation. When the solo challenge ended, we gathered the kids back at base camp. That night, around the fire, he shared his experiences. He pulled out his journal, reading aloud about the hawk, the deer, and the moments he felt the forest speaking to him. His voice was filled with wonder, his eyes alight with pride. But some of the older kids scoffed, accusing him of making it up. Our program had a strict no-lying policy, and I couldn't let their doubt dim his light. I stepped in describing what I had seen: the hawk on his stick, the deer by his shelter, the dogs at his side. The group fell silent, their skepticism giving way to awe. From that moment, he stood taller. He spoke more freely, his laughter brighter, as if the wilderness had helped him reclaim a piece of himself. On the final day, as we packed to leave, he pulled me aside. He looked up at me, his eyes shining, and said he wanted to be a game warden when he grew up. He wanted to protect animals, believing they understood him, and he understood them. I knelt down smiling and told him I believed he had a rare gift. If he chased that dream, I had no doubt he'd achieve greatness. I don't know what became of him after the program. I hope he's out there living his dream, guarding the creatures he so effortlessly befriended. His story is one of joy and mystery, a reminder that the smallest among us can hold the greatest magic. In a world that often feels predictable, he showed me that some connections between a boy and the wild defy all understanding. It was a dreary, rain-soaked afternoon in Seattle, the kind of day where the sky seemed to press down on the city, heavy with gray clouds that blurred the line between dusk and daylight. I was 25, a graphic designer who'd just finished a long shift at a small studio downtown. My old Toyota Corolla was running on fumes, so I pulled into a familiar gas station on the edge of Capitol Hill, a place I'd stopped at countless times before. The station was a modest setup, 2 sets of pumps, one right by the storefront along the main road, and another set further back, parallel to a quiet cross street that led into a residential area. The neon sign above the store flickered faintly, casting a sickly glow over the wet pavement. I parked at the pump closest to the storefront, the one with a clear view of the glass doors and the cashier inside, who was engrossed in a magazine. The station was eerily quiet. No other cars, no hum of engines, just the soft patter of rain on my windshield. The only other vehicle was a beat-up white van parked at the far set of pumps, its outline barely visible through the mist. It looked out of place, like it had been abandoned there for hours, though I couldn't quite say why it caught my eye. As I turned off the engine, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. A woman was walking from the van toward the storefront, her figure cutting through the haze. She was dressed in a floral dress, the kind you'd expect to see at a summer picnic or a church gathering bright, almost garishly cheerful, against the gloom. The dress was long, with a high neckline and puffed sleeves, giving her an oddly old-fashioned, almost Christian, cottagecore vibe. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, strands escaping in the damp air, and she carried no umbrella, letting the rain soak her shoulders. There was something about her expression, slightly dazed, her eyes darting around as if she were lost, that made me pause. I opened my car door to step out, and that's when she approached me. Her steps quickened, and before I could even get one foot on the ground, she was standing just a few feet away. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice trembling, though it felt rehearsed, like she'd said it a dozen times before. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm stranded. My van's out of gas, and I need to drive 30 miles to get home. I don't have any money." Her words were urgent, but her eyes didn't match the panic in her voice. They were wide, almost too wide, and they flicked from my face to the interior of my car, lingering on the passenger seat where my purse sat. My stomach twisted, a subtle instinctual warning that something wasn't right. I'd been approached by strangers before, but this felt different. The air around her seemed charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "I'm really sorry," I said, staying seated, one hand still on the door handle. "I'm broke myself. I barely have enough gas to get home." She didn't miss a beat. "Don't need money," she said quickly, waving a hand as if to dismiss the idea. "I just need you to come over to my van. Please, I need help with something. It'll only take a second." Her tone was insistent now, and she took a step closer, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of lavender clinging to her dress, mixed with something sharper, like stale cigarette smoke. I glanced toward the van, squinting through the rain. It was one of those old boxy models with no windows on the sides, the kind you'd see in a crime documentary. The rear window was completely covered with black duct tape, the edges curling up where the adhesive had started to fail. The rest of the van looked like it had been through a war dents along the side, a cracked tail light, and a layer of grime that made it impossible to tell its original color. My unease deepened. Why would she need me to go to her van? If she was out of gas, what could I possibly do that didn't involve money or a gas can? "I'm not sure I can help," I said, my voice firmer now. "Maybe the cashier inside can call someone for you." No, you don't understand," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I just need you to come to the van. Please. It's not a big deal." She kept repeating it. "Come to the van. Come to the van," like a mantra. her hands twisting together in front of her. Her nails were bitten down to the quick, and there was a faint tremor in her fingers. I shook my head, my grip tightening on the door. "I'm sorry, I can't. I need to get going." Her face changed then, just for a split second. The pleading mask slipped, and something colder flickered in her eyes. Frustration, maybe, or something darker. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but before she could say anything, I closed my door and locked it. She stood there for a moment, staring at me through the window, then turned and walked back toward the van, her dress clinging to her legs in the rain. I watched her closely, my heart pounding. The van's sliding side door was partially open, and as she reached it, she leaned inside and spoke to someone. I couldn't see who it was, just a shadow in the back seat, a vague shape that moved slightly as she gestured. My mind raced. Was there someone else in the van this whole time? A partner, a child, or something worse? The blacked-out windows and the disheveled state of the vehicle made every possibility feel sinister. Just then, a sleek Mercedes pulled up to the pump directly across from the van. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, glancing briefly at the woman before heading toward the store. I braced myself, expecting her to approach him with the same story, but she didn't. Instead, she slid the van's door shut, climbed into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The van sputtered to life, its headlights cutting through the rain as it peeled out of the lot and disappeared down the cross street. I sat there, frozen, the pump nozzle still in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't until I was driving home, the city lights blurring through the rain, that the full weight of the encounter hit me. The woman's insistence, the taped-up van, the shadow in the back seat, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Maybe I was being paranoid, but my intuition had never steered me wrong before. I'd read stories about scams at gas stations, about people luring victims to isolated spots, but this felt like more than a scam. There was a desperation in her eyes, but also a calculation, like she was playing a role, and I hadn't followed the script. When I got home, I couldn't shake the image of that van. I Googled gas station scams, Seattle, and found a few local news articles about similar incidents, women approaching drivers with sob stories, sometimes working with accomplices. One article mentioned a string of robberies in the area, though no arrests had been made. I even checked X, scrolling through posts from Seattle residents, and found a thread about a creepy van spotted at various gas stations around the city. The descriptions matched white, beat-up, blacked-out windows. Some users speculated it was tied to human trafficking. Others thought it was just a group of drifters pulling petty scams. There was no consensus, but the stories were enough to make my skin crawl. I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak in my apartment sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt like that woman's face peering through my window. The next day, I called the gas station and spoke to the manager, describing the woman and the van. He said he'd heard similar stories from other customers, but had no security footage. From that day, the cameras were down for maintenance. He promised to keep an eye out, but his tone suggested he didn't take it too seriously. Looking back, I wonder if I overreacted. Maybe she really was stranded, and I misread her intentions. But then I think about the black tape, the shadow in the van, the way she didn't approach the man in the Mercedes. My gut tells me I dodged something dangerous, even if I'll never know what. I haven't been back to that gas station since, and I don't plan to. Some encounters leave a mark, not because of what happened, but because of what might have. The move to our new apartment felt like a fresh chapter. Nestled in a quiet suburb, the building was old, but affordable, with peeling beige paint and a long, dimly lit hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly. David was 29, working late shifts as a waiter at a local diner, often picking up extra hours to make ends meet. My wife, Sarah, was deep into her final year at cosmetology school, juggling classes and practice sessions. Our 4-year-old son, Ethan, was a bundle of energy, always chasing imaginary adventures. And our German shepherd, Luna, was the loyal guardian of our little family. The apartment was modest, a cozy living room with a second-hand couch, a kitchen that smelled faintly of old wood, and 2 bedrooms down a narrow corridor. Ethan's room was small, but bright, with a single window overlooking a row of oak trees. We decorated it with his favorite things, a blue bedspread with rocket ships, a wooden dresser, and a chest overflowing with toy cars and stuffed animals. The move was hectic, but we were optimistic, ready for a new start after years in a cramped downtown rental. During the transition, we brought Luna to the apartment to familiarize her with the space. From the first visit, she acted strangely. She'd stop at the front door, her amber eyes fixed on the interior, ears twitching, as if sensing something we couldn't. She refused to cross the threshold, pacing nervously outside until we coaxed her in. Sarah brushed it off, saying Luna was just adjusting to the change, but I felt a twinge of unease. The air inside the apartment seemed heavier, especially in Ethan's room, where the temperature always felt a degree cooler than the rest of the house. I dismissed it as poor insulation in an old building. Once we settled in, things seemed normal. Luna, though reluctant, began to explore the apartment, but she avoided Ethan's room entirely. She'd linger at the doorway, staring inside with a low, uneasy posture, then turn away. I noticed it too, a faint, inexplicable discomfort whenever I entered that room. The light from the window seemed dimmer, the shadows sharper. But as a practical man, I chalked it up to fatigue from the move and my long work hours. 5 days into our new life, the first disturbing incident occurred. It was a rainy Wednesday, and I had the day off. I took Ethan and Luna to a nearby playground to burn off some energy. Ethan darted around climbing slides and chasing butterflies, while Luna trotted beside him, her tail wagging. We returned home in the late afternoon, and Ethan, exhausted, asked to rest in his room. I tucked him in, assuming he'd nap, and went to the kitchen to start dinner. Luna curled up on the living room rug, her eyes half closed, but alert. About an hour later, I heard Ethan's voice from his room. Soft, deliberate, as if he were holding a conversation. Curious, I approached quietly and peered through the half-open door. Ethan sat cross-legged on his bed, his small hands gesturing animatedly as he spoke. "No, I don't want to go there. It's dark," he said, his tone serious. He paused, as if listening to a response, then continued. "Why are you always mad?" My stomach tightened. I stepped inside, keeping my voice light. "Hey, buddy, who are you talking to?" Ethan looked up, his green eyes wide and unguarded. He pointed to the far corner of the room, where the ceiling met the wall. "The lady in the shadows. She's right there." I followed his gaze, but the corner was empty, just a plain stretch of wall, with a faint crack running through the plaster. The room felt colder, the air thick with an unnameable tension. Trying to stay calm, I sat beside him. "What does she look like? Does she have a name?" Ethan frowned, his small brow furrowing. "She's tall, with long hair. Her eyes are black, and she's angry. She says I have to listen to her." His words sent a chill through me, but I forced a smile. Kids had vivid imaginations. Right, I encouraged him to tell me more, hoping to ease his fixation. "Does she visit often?" Ethan shook his head. "Only at night. She doesn't like you or Mommy." I hugged him, reassuring him that he was safe, and brought him to the living room to play. But the encounter lingered in my mind, a nagging sense that something wasn't right. Luna, who had been resting now, stood at the entrance to Ethan's room, her gaze fixed on the same corner he'd pointed to her body tense. That evening, I shared the story with Sarah when she returned from school. She listened, her expression a mix of amusement and concern. "He's probably just processing the move," she said. "Kids make up all sorts of stories. We agreed to keep an eye on him and went to bed, hoping it was just a phase. Around 3 a.m., I woke to Ethan's cries piercing the silence. His voice was raw, filled with terror, calling for us from his room. I bolted down the hall, Sarah close behind. Ethan was curled up in the corner of his bed, clutching his blanket, his face pale. "She's here. She's watching me," he sobbed, pointing to the same corner of the ceiling. Luna burst into the room, her hackles raised, staring at the spot Ethan indicated. Her lips curled back, but she didn't make a sound, just stood rigid, as if confronting an invisible threat. I flicked on the light, scanning the room. Nothing. Just the same bare wall, the same faint crack. But the atmosphere was oppressive, like a weight pressing down on us. Sarah scooped Ethan into her arms, whispering reassurances, while I checked the window and closets, searching for any rational explanation. Finding none, I carried Ethan to our bedroom, and Luna followed, never taking her eyes off the doorway. We closed Ethan's door, and the tension seemed to ease, though Luna remained vigilant, lying at the foot of our bed with her ears pricked. The next day, I worked a double shift, leaving early and not returning until after midnight. I called Sarah during breaks, anxious for updates. She said Ethan was subdued, but fine, though Luna had spent the day pacing outside his room, refusing to eat. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to Ethan's words, the way Luna had stared at that corner. At 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a call from Sarah. Her voice was frantic. "David, it's happening again." Ethan's screaming. "Luna's going crazy, and I can't calm them down. Please come home." My heart raced. I told my manager I had a family emergency and sped back, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. When I burst through the door, the apartment was in chaos. Ethan was sobbing in Sarah's arms on our bed, his small body trembling. Luna paced the room, her eyes darting between the door and the hallway, her body low to the ground. Sarah's face was streaked with tears, her voice shaking as she described Ethan waking up in a panic, pointing to the corner again, and Luna's sudden agitation. "There's something wrong with this place," she said, her words heavy with fear. We couldn't stay. I grabbed a bag, packed essentials, and we left for my parents' house, a 30-minute drive away. In the car, Ethan, still clutching his blanket, looked at me with an eerie calm. "Daddy, the lady said she's a wraith. She said she'll never leave." My blood ran cold. Ethan had never heard the word wraith before, let alone understood its meaning. Sarah and I exchanged a glance, the weight of his words settling over us like a fog. The following morning, we returned to the apartment to gather more belongings steeling ourselves for what we might find. The moment we opened the door, a wave of dread hit me. The living room was untouched, but Ethan's room was a disaster. His dresser lay toppled drawers, spilling clothes across the floor. The toy chest was overturned, its contents scattered as if flung by an unseen force. Most chillingly, Ethan's bed stood upright against the wall, defying gravity. Luna stepped cautiously into the room, the first time she'd entered it. Her body tense, eyes scanning every corner. Sarah covered her mouth, tears welling up. I felt a mix of fear and anger, a desperate need to protect my family from whatever this was. We grabbed what we could and left, vowing never to return. That day, we began searching for a new place to live, far from the cursed apartment. Months later, we settled into a new home, a small house with a sunny backyard. Ethan seemed to recover his laughter, returning, though he never spoke of the lady again. Luna relaxed, though she occasionally stared at empty corners, her ears twitching. One evening, as Sarah and I watched a horror movie, a rare indulgence since the ordeal, Ethan wandered into the living room. The screen showed a spectral figure, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes. Ethan froze, his face draining of color. "That's her," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The lady from my room." We turned off the TV, comforting him until he calmed. From then on, we avoided anything that might trigger those memories. 15 years have passed, but the experience remains vivid, a scar on our family story. The old apartment building still stands, now abandoned, its windows boarded up the yard, overgrown with weeds. Locals say no tenant stays long, though no one can explain why. I've always been open to the paranormal, but this was different. It was personal, invasive, a violation of our safety. I still wonder who or what that wraith was, why it targeted Ethan's room, and whether it's truly gone. Those questions haunt me unanswered as I watch Ethan grow, hoping he's left the shadows behind. Some nights, the darkness doesn't just hide things, it brings them to you. I live in a place where the world feels like it's holding its breath, where the nearest neighbor is a half-mile away, and the only sounds at night are the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a canal. My house sits 150 feet back from a road that barely qualifies as one, a narrow strip of gravel winding through fields and orchards with no stores, no street lights, just 6 lonely houses scattered across miles of farmland. A week ago, something found me here, something that's still out there, watching, waiting. This is the story of the man who appeared on my porch, and the fear that hasn't left me since. The evening started like any other. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange as I stood by my driveway, waiting for the mother of the boy I babysit to pick him up. My house is tucked behind 3 parked cars, a rusty pickup, a sedan, and an old van shielding it from the road like a flimsy barricade. The boy, a wiry kid with a knack for jump scares, was inside, glued to his video game Apex Legends, blaring from my living room. His mom pulled up around 700 p.m., the light fading just enough to blur the edges of the kiwi orchard that borders my property. We chatted by her car, small talk about the kids' antics, when a sound cut through our words, a muffled cough, sharp and deliberate, coming from the orchard. It was so close, like someone was standing just beyond the trees. I froze my eyes, darting to the rows of gnarled kiwi vines, their leaves swaying faintly in the evening breeze. "Did you hear that I asked, my voice low?" She nodded, her brow furrowing, but I brushed it off. "Probably just the kid," I said, forcing a laugh. He was always sneaking around, trying to spook me, giggling when he gave himself away. But the cough didn't sound like him. It was deeper, rougher, like it came from someone fighting to stay quiet. We stood there listening, but the orchard was silent. Now the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and overripe fruit. The kid burst out of the house a moment later, shouting about his game, and his mom ushered him into the car. They drove off, their taillights swallowed by the dusk, and I was alone again. I didn't think about the cough until later, when the world was wrapped in darkness. It was past midnight, maybe closer to 1 a.m., and I was on my front porch, a cigarette glowing faintly between my fingers. My lighter had died, so I'd lit it on the stove, inside the flame, casting fleeting shadows across my kitchen before I hurried back out. The porch was my sanctuary, a creaky wooden platform where I could sit and think, hidden from the world by the night. No porch light, no glow from my phone, just the dim ember of my cigarette and the faint hum of mosquitoes circling in the humid air. The road was invisible, swallowed by a blackness so thick it felt like a living thing pressing against the edges of my property. Halfway through my cigarette, the air changed. It wasn't a sound at first, but a feeling like the moment before a storm, when the pressure shifts and your skin prickles. I sat with my back to the road, the orchard to my left, the canal somewhere beyond it, its water, a faint murmur in the distance. Then a voice, low, rough, close, shattered the silence. "Can I have a cigarette?" it said, each word slicing through the quiet like a blade. My heart stopped. I froze my fingers tightening around the cigarette, its ash falling silently to the porch. It's my phone, I thought, grasping for reason. An ad, a video, playing in the background. But my phone was on its dimmest setting screen, dark, and the voice came again, closer now, insistent. "Can I have a cigarette?" I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat. And there he was, a man towering over me, no more than 5 feet away, close enough that I could feel the weight of his presence. He was tall, 6'3", maybe 6'6", his frame looming like a shadow, given form. Long hair hung past his shoulders, tangled and dark, framing a face half hidden by a thick beard. He was barefoot, his feet pale against the wooden porch, and he wore no shirt, just loose pants, blue or gray. I couldn't tell, and a long coat or robe, its edges swaying faintly, though there was no breeze. My phone's flashlight caught his eyes, glinting like polished stone, unblinking, fixed on me. 2 steps, I thought, my pulse hammering. 2 steps, and he could touch me. My mind screamed to run, to scream, but my body wouldn't move. My heart was a wild thing, pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I stammered, fumbling for my cigarette pack, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. He took a step forward, his bare foot silent on the wood, and panic surged through me like a flood. "No, stop!" I shouted, my voice sharper than I expected. "You don't need to do that here." I threw the pack at him, the plastic case skittering across the porch, landing near his feet. He stopped his movement unnervingly, precise, like a machine powering down. He raised his hands to chest height, palms out, and said, "That was a good idea to toss it." His voice was calm, almost amused, but there was something wrong with it, something that made my skin crawl. He stood there, motionless, watching me, his hands still raised, his eyes never leaving mine. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The orchard was silent. The canal's murmur gone. The world reduced to this moment, this man, this fear. Then, slowly, deliberately, he began to back away, not turning, not breaking eye contact, just stepping backward toward the road. His movements were wrong, too smooth, too silent, like he wasn't touching the ground. The darkness swallowed him, his form blending into the night until he was gone. I strained to hear footsteps, gravel crunching, anything, but there was nothing. Just silence, thick and suffocating. I didn't move for what felt like hours. My cigarette burned out, its ash scattered across the porch. My phone's flashlight was still on its beam, trembling in my hand, casting jittery shadows across the wood. How did he get so close? I thought, my mind racing. The cars blocked the view from the road. No one could have seen me sitting here, not in this darkness, not with my phone dimmed. And the cigarette, I'd lit it inside the stove's flame, the only light the door closed behind me. He couldn't have heard me, couldn't have known I was smoking, unless he was already here, watching close enough to smell the smoke curling from my lips. I stumbled inside, locking the door, checking it twice, then 3 times. The house felt different now, its familiar creaks and groans suddenly menacing. I checked every window, every corner, my flashlight sweeping the rooms like a hunted animal searching for a predator. Nothing. No footprints on the porch. No trace of the pack I'd thrown. It was gone, like he'd taken it with him, or like it had never existed. I didn't sleep that night, my eyes fixed on the door, my ears straining for any sound. The orchard, the canal, the road, they were out there, hiding him, shielding him. The next night, it started. A rustle in the orchard, too deliberate to be the wind. I was inside, the lights off, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But there it was again, a twig snapping, a low scrape, like something dragging through the dirt. Not close enough for my cameras to catch, not bold enough to step into the open, but close enough to make my blood run cold. I checked the footage the next morning. Nothing, just hours of empty darkness. But the sounds came again the following night, and the night after that. Sometimes it was a faint cough, like the one I'd heard in the orchard, sharp and stifled. Sometimes it was footsteps, slow and deliberate, circling just beyond the reach of my lights. Always in the orchard, always near the canal, always too close. I called the sheriff, my voice shaking as I explained what happened. "Can you patrol out here?" I asked, knowing how empty the request sounded. They promised to try, but this road is a forgotten place. The kind of place where help doesn't come unless you're already gone. "You need evidence," they said. A name, a description, something concrete. But what could I say? That a man appeared out of nowhere, barefoot and half-dressed, and vanished like smoke, that I hear him every night, but my cameras see nothing. They'd think I was crazy, and maybe I am. He's still out there. I feel it, a certainty that sits in my bones like a sickness. The orchard isn't just trees anymore. It's a maze of shadows, each one hiding him, his eyes, his voice. The canal's murmur isn't soothing. It's a whisper, a warning I can't decipher. I don't sit on the porch anymore, don't smoke, don't dare step outside after dark. But I hear him every night closer each time, like he's testing me, waiting for me to make a mistake. Stay inside, I tell myself. Stay safe. But safety is an illusion out here, where the darkness doesn't just surround you, it hunts you. I keep thinking about that cough in the orchard, the one I ignored. Was it him, even then, watching, waiting for the right moment? How long had he been there, hidden among the trees, studying me? And why me? This road leads nowhere. This house is nothing special, just a tired old place in a tired old town. But he found me, and now he won't leave. I've thought about moving, packing up, and running, but where would I go? And what if he follows? What if he's not just a man, but something else? Something that doesn't need roads or reasons to find you. Last night, it was different. I was in bed, the house locked tight, when the sound came, not from the orchard, but from the porch. A single, deliberate step, the wood creaking under a weight I know too well. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just lay there, listening, praying. It was my imagination. Then a voice, low and rough, just outside my window. "Can I have a cigarette?" it said, and I swear the air turned to ice. I haven't slept since, haven't opened the curtains, haven't dared to look. But I know he's there waiting, and I don't know how much longer I can keep him out. In the sweltering summer of 1993, my family embarked on a journey to redefine our lives. My parents, David and Margaret, had poured their savings into a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a far cry from the noisy city apartment we'd outgrown. My older sister, Sarah, 16, and perpetually exasperated, my older brother James, 12 and bursting with curiosity, and I, Benjamin, an 8-year-old dreamer, were eager for the adventure. 2 younger sisters would join us later, but for now, we were a family of 5, united by the promise of a new beginning. The house was a spectacle, standing in stark contrast to its surroundings. The neighborhood was a sea of single-story bungalows, each with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and identical picket fences. Our home, however, was a 2-story giant boasting 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a beauty salon, and a workshop attached to the garage. Its white siding shimmered under the sun, but its tall, narrow windows seemed to follow us as we unloaded boxes from our battered minivan. The closing took place in a cramped real estate office, the air heavy with the smell of stale coffee. Mr. Grayson, the seller, was a lean man with piercing eyes and a smile that felt more like a mask. As the final papers were signed, my mother, always thorough, posed a question that shifted the room's atmosphere. "Has anyone ever died in this house?" Mr. Grayson's smile tightened, his gaze locking onto hers, worried about restless spirits. His tone was teasing, but there was a coldness beneath it, a hint of something unspoken. My mother's hand trembled, her pen pausing mid-air. My father, quick to ease the tension, chuckled and steered the conversation to property taxes, but the question hung like a shadow. We left as homeowners, but my mother's unease was palpable. Moving day was a blur of activity. Boxes stacked in the foyer, furniture shuffled into place, and the scent of fresh paint mingling with dust. The house was grand, with soaring ceilings and gleaming hardwood floors. But an odd stillness pervaded, as if it were holding its breath. My parents assigned bedrooms, and I was given the last room on the left. Upstairs, a spacious corner room with a view of the woods. That first night, I lay in bed, the darkness heavy around me. The room felt vast, oppressive, and a prickling sensation crawled up my spine, as if eyes were watching from the corners. Unable to bear it, I fled to James's room, pleading to share his space. He rolled his eyes, but agreed, and we settled into the last room on the right, a smaller sanctuary that felt less exposed. The neighborhood was a quintessential slice of 1990s suburbia. Kids raced on bikes, neighbors chatted over hedges, and the air hummed with the rhythm of daily life. But our house drew attention, its size and uniqueness, a topic of hushed conversation. Belonged to Mr. Grayson's wife. A neighbor remarked, her voice low. She ran the salon. Strange man, that Grayson. A week after moving in, my parents proposed a walk to meet the neighbors. We locked the front door, turned off every light, and set out into the evening. The neighborhood's 5 streets wound through rows of identical homes, their windows glowing warmly. We exchanged greetings, collected homemade pies, and felt the embrace of our new community. As twilight deepened, we headed back, our chatter fading as the house came into view. Every light blazed, casting an unnatural glow, and the front door stood wide open, its frame a dark void. My mother gripped my arm, her voice sharp. Stay here. My father, his face taut, grabbed a flashlight from the minivan and approached the house. Sarah, James, and I waited, our hearts pounding, as he vanished inside. After an agonizing wait, he returned, shaking his head. It's empty. My mother called the police, who searched every room, their beams cutting through the darkness. They found no signs of intrusion, no footprints, no missing items, nothing amiss. Could have been a faulty lock, an officer suggested, but my father's expression was grim. We'd checked the door twice. That night, as I lay beside James, the house felt alive, its walls pulsing with secrets. The open door wasn't an oversight. It was a message, a sign that we weren't alone. The days that followed were a mix of normalcy and unease. My parents threw themselves into settling in hanging pictures and planting flowers, but the house's presence loomed. I began to notice small things: a chill in certain rooms, a faint reflection in the hallway mirror that didn't match my movements. My mother grew quieter, her eyes darting to the windows at odd moments. The neighborhood, with its friendly faces, felt like a facade hiding something darker beneath. One evening, as I passed the upstairs hallway, I caught my reflection in the mirror at the end of the corridor. For a moment, it seemed to linger, its edges blurred, as if someone else stood behind me. I turned, but the hallway was empty. The house was watching, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it knew more about us than we knew about it. The open door incident left a mark, but my parents pressed forward, determined to make the house our own. My mother arranged furniture with meticulous care, while my father tackled the overgrown lawn. Sarah James and I explored the neighborhood, trying to ignore the chill that followed us. To solidify our place in the community, my parents planned a welcome party, transforming the front yard into a festive scene. Balloons swayed on the porch, the grill smoked with burgers, and a table groaned under the weight of potluck dishes. Neighbors arrived, their laughter filling the air, but the house stood silent, its windows reflecting the fading light like watchful eyes. Among the guests was Mr. Bill, our next-door neighbor, a burly man with a weathered face and a penchant for flannel shirts. He hesitated at the porch, his eyes scanning the house as if it might strike. After a long pause, he stepped inside, settling on the living room couch with a beer, his posture stiff. I caught him glancing at the staircase, his grip tightening on the bottle, as if bracing for something unseen. The party hummed with energy, but I retreated to the playroom, a small space off the living room, where James and I kept our prized possessions: a Sega console, a small TV, and my hamster, Peanut. Feeling restless, I let Peanut roam in his plastic ball, watching as he rolled across the hardwood. The ball veered into the living room, stopping near Mr. Bill's feet. His face paled, his eyes fixed on the ball with an intensity that unnerved me. My mother, noticing his unease, approached. "Everything okay, Bill?" His voice was low, strained. "If that ball moves again, I'm leaving, and I won't return." The room hushed, all eyes on him. At that moment, Peanut surged forward, the ball darting across the floor. Mr. Bill leapt up, his beer spilling, and fled out the front door, leaving a stunned silence. The guests chuckled, assuming he was startled by the hamster, but I saw the terror in his eyes. It wasn't Peanut. He feared it was something the house had shown him. My mother tried to explain the next day, assuring Mr. Bill it was just a pet, but he refused to step foot inside again. He'd meet us in the driveway or at the mailbox, his gaze avoiding the house. His reaction lingered in my mind, a clue to a puzzle I couldn't yet solve. Weeks later, a conversation in the front yard unveiled the house's dark history. My mother was pruning roses when Mrs. Eleanor, the elderly woman across the street, approached. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight bun, her eyes sharp with knowledge. "You've heard about the house, haven't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother frowned. "Heard what?" Mrs. Eleanor glanced at the house, her expression grave. "2 women died there. Mr. Grayson's wife and daughter. Cancer took them years apart." My mother's hands froze, the pruning shears trembling. Mrs. Eleanor continued her words deliberate. "Grayson was an odd man. Built hidden rooms in that house behind bookshelves under stairs. Some say he stored firefighting gear, axes, hoses, in a secret compartment by the staircase. Others say he kept a safe upstairs, sealed behind a wall." The revelation shook my mother. Determined to uncover the truth, she invited Mrs. Eleanor over to explore. They began in the computer room, where a bookshelf stood flush against the wall, its edges sealed with screws. In the laundry room, they found its back hinged like a door leading to a narrow space beneath the stairs. Dust coated the floor, and cobwebs draped the walls. But the space was empty. Its purpose, a mystery. Upstairs in the room, meant to be mine, they discovered a faint crack in the wall, tracing the outline of a sealed door. Mrs. Eleanor claimed it concealed Mr. Grayson's safe, a relic of his secretive nature. These findings deepened my mother's fear. She began watching talk shows about the supernatural, absorbing every word of psychics like Sylvia Brown. The house, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a maze of secrets, each hidden corner a reminder of its past inhabitants. I started noticing things too. Reflections in mirrors that seemed to move independently, a faint pressure in the air when I passed the staircase. The house wasn't just a building. It was a presence observing us waiting. One night, as I brushed my teeth in the upstairs bathroom, I glanced at the mirror and froze. My reflection stared back, but its eyes seemed darker, its mouth curved in a way mine wasn't. I blinked, and it was gone, but the memory lingered, a quiet warning from the house. By the time I reached 4th grade, the house's peculiarities were undeniable. Doors opened and closed on their own, their movements slow and deliberate, as if guided by an unseen force. Objects shifted. A glass left on the kitchen counter appeared on the dining table. A book moved from the shelf to the floor. My father, ever practical, attributed it to drafts or carelessness, but my mother grew increasingly withdrawn, her eyes shadowed with fear. I often found her in the family van parked in the driveway, a portable TV glowing with talk shows, her lap cluttered with tabloid magazines. "Why are you always out here?" "Mom?" I asked one day, my voice small. She forced a smile. "It's quieter, Ben," but her trembling hands betrayed her. The house terrified her. The disturbances grew more frequent. At night, I'd catch glimpses of movement in the hallway mirror, as if someone stood just out of sight. James and my mother shared their own experiences. Hair tugged by invisible fingers, a sudden push on the stairs. My mother confessed she spent her days in the van to avoid being alone in the house, her fear overwhelming her. I oddly remained untouched. The entities, whatever they were, seemed to ignore me, and I felt a strange mix of relief and resentment. Why was I spared? Did the house deem me unworthy of its attention? At 12, I faced a darkness of my own. One afternoon, while my mother, James, and Emily were at the store, I was consumed by a despair I couldn't explain. In a moment of desperation, I took a belt from my closet and tried to end my life. As the world faded, a cold presence enveloped me, and I awoke on the floor. The belt snapped in two. Something had intervened, but its nature eluded me. When my family returned, my mother noticed the marks on my neck. "What happened, Ben?" I lied, my voice steady. My shirt caught on a nail in the attic. Her eyes lingered, but she didn't press. The incident piqued James's curiosity, and we ventured into the attic, in the closet of my intended bedroom. Among dusty toys, we found a plaster mold of teeth, yellowed and unsettling. We left it there, unwilling to dwell on its significance. My mother's obsession with the paranormal intensified. She quoted Sylvia Browne, insisting that horror movies invited evil into the home. One day, James and I found our father's VHS tapes, The Exorcist Poltergeist, in the trash. "Sylvia says they're dangerous," my mother declared. We smuggled them back to our room, hiding them under the bed. Her fears extended to mundane things. When she noticed we'd left Christmas lights up past the holidays, she grew frantic. "Sylvia says it's bad luck," she said, her voice trembling. James, exasperated, snapped, "This house is already cursed. I feel hands in my hair at night, and I see things in the mirrors." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "It happens to me too," she admitted. "I've been pushed on the stairs. That's why I stay in the van. I can't be here alone." Her words broke me. The house was destroying her, and I was powerless to stop it. As the years passed, my parents' marriage unraveled, and my father moved out, leaving us in the house's grip. My mother turned to alcohol and pills, her fear morphing into addiction. One night, as I sat in the computer room, I noticed the mirror on the wall. My reflection seemed to flicker, its edges blurred, as if someone stood behind me. I turned, but the room was empty. The house was playing with me, its presence growing bolder. The house's grip tightened as the years passed. In June 2007, a fire ravaged the downstairs, leaving blackened walls and the stench of smoke. The fire department deemed the cause undetermined, but rumors of arson swirled. A month later, my mother succumbed to her addiction, passing away in the hospital from liver failure. Her death left a void, the house a hollow reminder of our fractured family. James and I returned to the ruins to salvage what we could. In the attic of my would-be bedroom, I felt compelled to dig through the insulation. There, hidden beneath layers of fiberglass, I found a Ouija board, a check from Mr. Grayson to an ambulance service, and a photograph of two women, likely his wife and daughter, lost to cancer. James, caught in his emo phase, framed the Ouija board check and photo, hanging them above his bed. I warned him against it, but he was drawn to the mystery. Life moved on the house, a fading memory, until a chance encounter years later brought the past into sharp focus. Through Sarah, I met Michael, Mr. Grayson's grandson, at a local dirt track race. Over beers, I mentioned the house and the Ouija board. Michael's face paled. "That's mine," he said. "I bought it as a kid trying to reach my grandmother, Eleanor, and my Aunt Margaret." The names hit me like a thunderbolt. Years earlier, in the computer room, I'd named the house's entities Eleanor and Margaret, a choice I'd thought random. Michael confirmed the women in the photo were his relatives, both taken by cancer. He asked for the board and items, and we returned them, shaken by the coincidence. James and I have shared this story with others, but few believe us. We've made peace with that, knowing the truth we lived through. The house is gone, reduced to ashes, but its shadow lingers. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, I catch a glimpse of movement in a mirror and wonder if Eleanor and Margaret are still watching their presence etched into the fabric of my life. It was a frigid winter night a few years ago, and I found myself back at my parents' home, nestled in the separate studio they had converted from an old garage. The space was cozy, insulated against the biting cold, with a small heater humming softly in the corner. I had returned for a brief visit, seeking solace after a hectic stretch of work and personal turmoil. That evening, I indulged in a glass or two of red wine, not enough to cloud my mind, but sufficient to dull the edges of my thoughts and coax a gentle fatigue. By 2:00 a.m., I was sprawled on the plush carpet phone, pressed to my ear, engrossed in a late-night conversation with my then-boyfriend, Daniel. We talked about everything and nothing, life's uncertainties, our dreams, the weight of the world, hoping to untangle the knots in my mind. The studio was enveloped in absolute darkness. No street lights pierced the windows. No night light glowed. The blackout curtains my parents had installed ensured the room was a void, the kind of dark where shapes blur into nothingness. I preferred it that way. The absence of light felt like a cocoon shielding me from the outside world. As Daniel's voice droned on, warm and familiar, I shifted onto my side, letting the carpet cradle my body. My eyelids grew heavy, the wine and exhaustion pulling me towards sleep. That's when I sensed it, a presence beside me on the floor. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. In the pitch black, a vague shape materialized, soft and indistinct, like a pillow or a folded blanket. It was close, mere inches from my shoulder. Without much thought, I rolled toward it, my arms instinctively reaching out to pull it closer, seeking the comfort of something tangible in the dark. The moment my fingers brushed its surface, everything changed. The air in the room shifted, as if the very fabric of reality had been tugged askew. The warmth from the heater vanished, replaced by a bone-deep chill that seeped into my skin. It wasn't a draft or a sudden drop in temperature. It was as if the air itself had thickened, grown heavy with an unseen weight. A wave of emotion crashed over me, so sudden and intense, it stole my breath. It was sadness, but not my own. It was a profound, suffocating grief, alien and overwhelming, like stepping into the heart of someone else's despair. My chest tightened, my heart pounded, and a primal instinct screamed that I had touched something I was never meant to encounter. I froze, my arms still loosely wrapped around the shape. It didn't feel like a pillow anymore. Its texture was wrong, too dense, too cold, almost pulsating under my touch. The darkness seemed to pulse with it, pressing against my skin, my mind. Daniel's voice on the phone became distant, muffled, as though he were speaking from another world. Panic surged through me, sharp and electric. I scrambled to my feet, my phone clattering to the floor, and bolted for the door. My hands fumbled with the knob, my breath ragged, until I stumbled into the icy night air. The studio's door slammed behind me, and I stood trembling in the driveway, my heart racing, as if I'd narrowly escaped a predator. I didn't sleep that night. Curled up in my parents' guest room, I replayed the incident over and over. Had I imagined it? Was it the wine, the exhaustion, or something else entirely? The memory of that sadness, so vivid and foreign, clung to me like damp cloth. It wasn't just fear. It was the certainty that I had brushed against something sentient, something that didn't want to be disturbed. The next morning, I returned to the studio, steeling myself against the unease that knotted my stomach. Sunlight streamed through the windows, banishing the oppressive dark. I scanned the carpet where I'd lain, searching for the shape I'd embraced. There was nothing. No pillow, no blanket, no trace of anything that could explain what I'd felt. The spot was bare, the room pristine. I checked every corner, every closet, even under the furniture, but found no evidence of the object. The heater hummed as it had the night before, the air warm and ordinary. Yet the memory of that chill, that grief, lingered unshakable. I confided in Daniel later that day, my voice trembling as I recounted the experience. He listened patiently, but offered rational explanations. Sleep deprivation, a vivid dream, the effects of alcohol. "You were tired, babe," he said gently. "Your mind was probably just messing with you." His words made sense, but they didn't soothe the disquiet in my chest. I knew what I'd felt, something real, something alive, in its own terrible way. In the weeks that followed, I avoided the studio, opting to sleep in the main house. My parents noticed my unease, but didn't press when I brushed off their questions. I scoured online forums searching for similar experiences. Stories of shadow figures, sleep paralysis, and haunted objects filled my screen, but none matched the visceral intensity of that night. I even contacted a local psychic, half out of desperation, but her vague talk of residual energies left me more frustrated than enlightened. The experience faded with time, as memories do, but it never truly left me. Certain triggers, a dark room, the scent of red wine, the hum of a heater, bring it rushing back. I've since moved across the country, built a new life, and ended things with Daniel. Yet the studio, now repurposed as my parents' art space, remains a place I can't enter without a shiver. I've asked my parents about the garage's history, probing for anything unusual, a former owner, a tragedy. But they know little beyond its mundane past as a storage space. Sometimes I wonder if I crossed a threshold that night, stepping into a realm I wasn't meant to touch. The shape in the dark wasn't just an object. It was a conduit, a fragment of something vast and sorrowful. I've never felt that exact sensation again, but I carry its echo, a quiet reminder that the world holds mysteries we may never understand. I still sleep with a light on, just in case. The summer air hung warm and heavy over Hilton Head Island, where palm trees swayed gently against a backdrop of starlit skies. My family had gathered for our annual vacation, a tradition that brought together my siblings, their spouses, and our children in the sprawling Palmetto Dunes resort. Each family rented a separate condo spread across the resort's manicured grounds. My older sister and I stayed in units near the quieter wooded end close to Lexington Road, while my younger sister's condo sat nearer the bustling center, just past the tennis courts and security roundabout. The resort felt like a world unto itself, safe, serene, and insulated from the outside. But last summer, something unsettling crept into our idyllic escape, leaving us questioning what we thought we knew about the night. It began on the third evening of our trip. After a day of beach walks and bike rides, we converged at my younger sister's condo for drinks and dessert. Her place was cozy, with wide windows overlooking a manicured lawn and a deck that caught the ocean breeze. As we sat around the dining table, sharing stories and laughter, she leaned forward, her voice dropping. She told us about the previous night when she'd been jolted awake at around 2:30 in the morning by a sharp knocking at her front door. At first, she assumed it was one of her teenage sons, perhaps sneaking back after a late-night adventure and forgetting the entry code. But when she checked their rooms, both boys were fast asleep, their soft breathing undisturbed. The knocking persisted, steady and deliberate, echoing through the silent condo. Unease settled over her, and she woke her husband. He grumbled half asleep, but by the time he reached the door, the sound had stopped. He stepped onto the deck, scanning the well-lit area, but found no one, no footprints, no shadows, not even a stray leaf out of place. They dismissed it as a mistake, perhaps a confused guest from another condo, disoriented after too many drinks. We listened, nodded, and agreed it was likely nothing. The story faded into the background of our evening, overshadowed by laughter and plans for the next day. I forgot about it entirely until a few nights later, when the same eerie phenomenon found me. I was driving home from the resort, a long, solitary journey that stretched into the early hours. Around 2:45 in the morning, exhaustion weighed on me, and I pulled into a rest stop to nap. As I drifted into sleep, a vivid dream took hold. In it, I was at my ex-wife's house, a place I hadn't visited in years. The summer night was quiet, the air thick with stillness. We were talking calmly, unusually, so about mundane things like bills. She excused herself to shower upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room. Then a loud knocking began at the front door, sharp and insistent. I called out, thinking it might be our kids, but remembered they were away for the night. Curiosity overrode caution, and I opened the door to find no one there, just an empty porch bathed in moonlight, drawn to investigate. I stepped outside, circling through the side yard to the back deck. The sliding glass door stood ajar, its frame glinting in the dim light. A chill ran through me. I called upstairs, warning that someone might be inside. But before I could act, the dream shattered. I woke, heart pounding, to real knocking, loud, rhythmic, and unmistakable, coming from the door of my condo back at the resort. The coincidence was jarring. I fumbled for my phone, checking for messages, half expecting an emergency from one of my sisters. Nothing. I woke my wife, who stirred groggily, but the knocking stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Instinct drove me to check on our children. I crept into their rooms, finding them sound asleep, oblivious to the disturbance. Moving to the dining area, I peered through the window onto the front deck. The area was brightly lit, the resort's security lights casting a sterile glow. No one was there. No footprints, no movement, just an eerie stillness that felt heavier than it should. I stood, frozen, straining to hear any sound, but the night was silent. The next morning, we packed to leave, and as I recounted the incident to my wife, my younger sister's story rushed back. The realization hit me like a cold wave. The knocking had occurred at nearly the same time in two different condos, miles apart within the resort. Back home, I couldn't shake the unease. I called my older sister, wondering if she'd experienced anything strange. To my surprise, she hesitated before admitting that she too had heard knocking on her condo door around 2:30 a.m. a few nights earlier. Like us, she'd found no one outside, and her husband had dismissed it as a prank or a mix-up. None of us had connected the incidents at the time, each assuming it was an isolated event. Now pieced together, the pattern felt too precise to be random. 3 separate condos, 3 nights, 3 sets of knocks at roughly the same hour, with no trace of a culprit. We began to dig deeper, sharing theories over late-night phone calls. My younger sister, ever the skeptic, suggested it could be a resort worker checking units or a group of teenagers playing pranks. But the resort's security was tight, with cameras and patrols, and no reports of disturbances surfaced. My older sister, more open to the unexplained, floated the idea of a restless spirit, perhaps tied to the island's history. Hilton Head had its share of old tales, stories of shipwrecks, plantations, and forgotten souls lingering in the marshes. I wasn't sure what to believe. The rational part of me clung to coincidence, but the timing, the absence of evidence, and the vividness of my dream gnawed at me. To find answers, I reached out to a local historian who led ghost tours on the island. She listened patiently as I recounted our experiences, then shared a story that sent a shiver through me. Decades ago, she said, a groundskeeper at Palmetto Dunes had died unexpectedly during a night shift. He was known for patrolling the resort's outer edges, tapping on doors to check for unlocked entrances or stranded guests. Some believed his spirit still wandered, repeating his rounds in the early hours. The historian couldn't confirm if our condos aligned with his old route, but the timing of the knocks matched the hours he'd worked. The explanation was unsettling, but oddly comforting. It gave shape to the mystery, even if it didn't resolve it. I shared the story with my sisters, and we debated whether we'd encountered a ghost, a prankster, or something else entirely. My younger sister remained unconvinced, insisting there was a logical answer we hadn't found. My older sister embraced the ghostly theory, half joking that we should return next summer to investigate. I stayed on the fence, torn between skepticism and the lingering chill of that night. As months passed, the incident faded, but it never fully left me. I found myself avoiding late-night drives, wary of dreams that felt too real. The memory of those knocks, sharp, deliberate, unanswered, stayed lodged in my mind, a puzzle with no solution. I don't know if we crossed paths with a restless spirit or simply fell victim to an eerie coincidence. All I know is that the next time I visit Hilton Head, I'll be locking the door a little tighter and keeping the lights on past midnight. The forest was a cathedral of silence, its air thick with the earthy scent of moss pine and damp soil. I was 32, an amateur mycologist and wildlife enthusiast, living on the outskirts of Olympia, Washington, where the dense woodlands of the Pacific Northwest offered endless opportunities for exploration. On a crisp autumn morning, I set out to a remote stretch of forest I'd visited only a handful of times before, a place so secluded it felt like stepping into another world. My goal was to set up trail cameras along a game trail to capture footage of the local wildlife, deer, foxes, maybe even an elusive cougar if I was lucky. As a bonus, I foraged for chanterelle mushrooms along the way, their golden caps peeking through the undergrowth, filling my canvas bag with a satisfying weight. After an hour of hiking, I found the perfect spot, a flat clearing where a well-trodden game trail snaked through towering Douglas firs and cedars. The forest canopy was so dense that only slivers of sunlight pierced through, casting a mosaic of shifting shadows on the forest floor. The air was cool, heavy, with the promise of rain, and the only sounds were the distant caw of a crow and the rustle of leaves underfoot. I set up 3 trail cameras, each mounted on a sturdy tree with a clear view of the trail. I switched them to video mode, checked the batteries, and secured my gear before heading back to my truck. the weight of the mushrooms in my bag, a pleasant reminder of the day's success. 3 weeks later, I returned to retrieve the footage. The forest was unchanged, still silent, and untouched, as if time had paused in my absence. I hiked to the clearing, my boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, and collected the cameras. 2 of them had recorded nothing, not a single deer or squirrel, which was unusual for such an active trail. The 3rd camera, however, was different. Its SD card felt unnaturally cold in my hand, as if it had been sitting in a freezer rather than a forest. I climbed into my truck, popped the card into my laptop, and opened the files. To my surprise, the camera hadn't recorded any video, despite being set to video mode. Instead, it had captured 4 still images. The first showed nothing but the empty trail trees and brush bathed in the dim light of dusk. The second image made my breath catch. A woman stood in the center of the frame, motionless, wearing a long, flowing gown that looked like it belonged in a Victorian portrait. The fabric was tattered, fraying at the hems, and she clutched an old-fashioned porcelain doll against her chest, its glassy eyes staring blankly into the distance. Her face was obscured by a curtain of dark, matted hair, and the shadows around her seemed to bend unnaturally, as if the light itself was avoiding her. The 3rd image was worse. She was closer now, facing the camera directly. Her eyes were visible through the veil of hair, pale, lifeless, and locked onto the lens with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. The doll was still pressed against her chest, its painted smile grotesquely out of place. The 4th and final image showed the trail empty again, as if she had vanished into thin air. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, the silence of the truck suddenly oppressive. This forest was miles from any road or town. No one should have been out here, let alone standing in front of my camera in the middle of the night. I hiked back to the exact spot where the woman had appeared, hoping to find some trace of her presence. But the ground was undisturbed. No footprints, no broken twigs, nothing to suggest anyone had been there. My own tracks from weeks ago were still faintly visible, but the undergrowth around the camera was pristine. A cold sweat prickled my skin as I packed up and drove home, the SD card burning a hole in my pocket. That night, everything changed. I transferred the images to my laptop, hoping to analyze them for clues. But as soon as the files copied over the atmosphere in my small cabin shifted, shadows seemed to move in the corners of my vision, darting just out of sight. Footsteps echoed in the hallway when I was alone, slow and deliberate, like someone pacing outside my bedroom door. Worst of all was the feeling of being watched, a heavy, suffocating presence that lingered just behind me, no matter where I turned. I barely slept, my dreams filled with flashes of that woman's pale eyes and the doll's frozen smile, determined to get answers. I decided to return to the forest this time, better prepared. I packed 4 additional trail cameras, motion-activated perimeter alarms, and a set of high-powered camp lights. I also brought my rifle, a .308 I kept for protection in the backcountry, and a night vision scope. My plan was to camp overnight in the clearing, surrounded by a ring of cameras and alarms, with a clearly marked exit route to my truck. I set up a hammock in the center of the site, the cameras positioned to cover every angle, and tested the alarms to ensure they'd trigger at the slightest movement. As night fell, the forest grew heavier, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. The usual chorus of crickets and owls was absent, replaced by a silence so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. I sat in my hammock rifle across my lap, scanning the trees through the night vision scope. Hours passed without incident, the monotony lulling me into a false sense of security. Then, just after midnight, everything exploded into chaos. A series of deafening booms shattered the silence, rapid and relentless, like gunfire echoing through the trees. My first thought was that someone was shooting at me, trying to scare me off. But as I crouched low, heart racing, I realized the truth was far worse. Every single perimeter alarm, 6 in total, spread across a 50-yard radius, had triggered simultaneously. The booms weren't gunfire. They were the alarms screaming in unison, as if something had crossed every boundary at once. Panic seized me, a primal fear that turned my blood to ice. I grabbed my pack and rifle, abandoning the hammock, and sprinted toward my exit route. The forest seemed to fight me, branches clawing at my face, roots tripping my feet. I stumbled through thickets of sticker bushes, the thorns tearing at my jacket, and fell twice, my knees slamming into the earth. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't dare stop. The air felt alive, charged with a malevolent energy that pressed against my back, urging me to run faster. I burst through a patch of ferns and tumbled into a shallow ditch, the cold, damp soil swallowing me up to my chest. The scent of rotting leaves filled my nose as I clawed my way out, my pulse hammering in my ears. Through the darkness, I saw the glint of my truck under the moonlight, parked just beyond the tree line. I scrambled to my feet, reached for the door handle, and then everything went black. When I came to, I was sitting in the driver's seat, my hands trembling on the wheel. My pack and rifle, which I always stored behind the driver's seat, were inexplicably behind the passenger seat, as if someone had moved them. The dashboard clock read 3:17 a.m. 3 hours had passed, but I had no memory of what had happened. My body ached like I'd run a marathon, and my clothes were streaked with mud and torn in places I didn't remember snagging. Shaken to my core, I started the engine and sped home, collapsing into bed as exhaustion overwhelmed me. A few days later, I forced myself to return one last time to retrieve my equipment. The forest felt different now, oppressive, almost hostile, as if it resented my presence. I dismantled the cameras and alarms in record time, my hands shaking as I packed them into my truck. The clearing was unchanged, but the air carried a weight I couldn't explain, like a warning to never come back. When I got home, I reviewed the new camera footage, hoping for answers. Every single frame was blank, not a single image or video, just static. The strange occurrences at home stopped after that, but the memory of those images lingers. I've never returned to that part of the forest, and I've stopped setting up trail cameras altogether. Some things are better left unseen, and some places are better left alone. The night was warm, a late summer evening, in a small rural town where the stars burned bright against a velvet sky. My boyfriend, Jake, and I, Emily, had spent the evening at his family's house, a cozy single-story home tucked at the end of a private dirt road. Jake, 25, worked as a mechanic at a local garage, while I, 23, was a part-time barista studying graphic design online. We'd been together for 2 years, our routines familiar and comforting, often ending with quiet nights at his place or mine. That evening, we were at his house because Jake needed to grab clothes for an overnight stay at my place. His family's road was a close-knit community where everyone knew each other, and any newcomer, human or animal, was noticed immediately. Jake's parents had lived there for over a decade, and their 3 dogs, Max, Sandy, and Little Bit, were as much a part of the neighborhood as the people. Before leaving, we spent a few minutes with the dogs. Max, a lazy hound, lounged inside, while Sandy and Little Bit, 2 energetic terriers, followed us to the porch, their tails wagging as we scratched their ears. All 3 were accounted for a detail that would later haunt me. We climbed into Jake's pickup truck around 11:30 p.m., the air thick with the scent of pine and earth. The private road stretched ahead, flanked by dense woods on one side and open fields on the other, its gravel crunching softly beneath the tires. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the familiar path we'd driven countless times. About 50 feet ahead, a pair of glowing eyes caught our attention, hovering low to the ground. Jake slowed the truck, assuming it was a rabbit or a raccoon, common sights in the area. "Just a critter," he said, his voice casual. The dogs at home often stared at small animals scurrying through the brush, so we weren't alarmed. Out of curiosity, Jake angled the truck to aim the headlights directly at the eyes, expecting the creature to dart away. But what we saw froze us in our seats. The thing illuminated by the headlights was no ordinary animal. It was too large to be a cat, too small to be a deer, and far too slender to be a wild pig. Its body was sleek, covered in a glossy black coat that shimmered unnaturally in the light, almost like wet tar. The creature's proportions were wrong. Its shoulders seemed misaligned, as if its joints didn't fit together properly. It moved with an eerie deliberation, taking slow, measured steps toward us, pausing to crouch after each one. Its eyes, a piercing yellow, never blinked, locked onto us with an intensity that felt almost human. I gripped Jake's arm, my heart racing. "That's not a dog," I whispered. Jake's jaw tightened, his hands steady on the wheel. "It's on all fours," he said, but I could have sworn I saw it rise onto its hind legs for a moment, its silhouette shifting in a way that defied nature. The creature edged closer, its movements jerky, yet purposeful, like a predator sizing up its prey. After 4 agonizing steps, it stopped crouching low, its eyes still fixed on us. Fear took over, and Jake hit the gas, the truck lurching forward as we sped away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the creature turn and slip into the woods, its form dissolving into the shadows. We drove in silence, the adrenaline still coursing through us. Jake tried to rationalize it, suggesting it might have been a malnourished coyote or a stray dog with mange. But neither of us believed that. The way it moved, the way it stared, it wasn't natural. I kept replaying the image in my mind. The slick coat, the disjointed shoulders, the unblinking eyes. It resembled a canine, but felt like something else entirely. Something that didn't belong in the world we knew. We reached my house, a small property I shared with my disabled grandparents, about 20 minutes away. The driveway was long stretching, nearly 150 yards from the road to the house, bordered by overgrown grass and a rusted wire fence. I'd left the gate open when we left earlier, a habit I knew annoyed my grandparents. They were strict about closing it, especially at night, as they relied on the security it provided. By now, they'd be asleep, unaware of our late return. But when we pulled up, the gate was closed, its metal latch firmly in place. Jake frowned, glancing at me. "Didn't you say you left it open?" I nodded, my stomach sinking. I'd forgotten to close it, and my grandparents, both in their late 70s and mobility limited, wouldn't have ventured out in the dark to secure it. We sat in the truck, the engine idling, staring at the gate. The memory of the creature lingered, making the closed gate feel like a warning. Jake got out to open it, his flashlight sweeping the surrounding grass. Nothing moved, but the air felt heavy, as if we were being watched. We drove up to the house, parked, and hurried inside, locking the door behind us. The living room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. My grandparents' bedroom door was closed, their soft snores audible through the walls. Jake and I sat on the couch, trying to process what we'd seen. I pulled out my phone, searching for local wildlife that might match the creature's description. But nothing fit. Coyotes were too bulky, foxes too small, and no animal moved like that. Jake suggested it could be an escaped exotic pet, but the idea felt hollow. Deep down, we both knew it was something stranger. The next morning, I called Jake's mom to ask if anyone in the neighborhood had seen an unusual animal. She said no, confirming that no strays or new pets had been reported. The dogs, she added, had been restless all night, pacing the yard and staring into the woods. I didn't tell her what we'd seen, afraid she'd think we were imagining things. Instead, I asked Jake to check his family's trail camera mounted near the edge of their property to monitor wildlife. He promised to review the footage later that day. By afternoon, Jake called me, his voice tense. The trail camera had captured something the previous night, just after we'd left. At 11:45 p.m., the infrared lens recorded a figure crossing the frame. It was the same creature, sleek, black, with glowing eyes and a contorted gait. The footage showed it pausing, staring directly at the camera, as if aware of its presence. Then it moved off-screen, its body blending into the darkness. Jake sent me the clip, and watching it sent chills down my spine. The creature's form was clearer than in the headlights, its limbs unnaturally long, its head tilted at an odd angle. It looked like a dog, but moved like nothing I'd ever seen. We debated reporting it to animal control, but hesitated. What would we say? That we'd seen a monster. Instead, we decided to avoid Jake's road at night, sticking to daytime visits. I also started closing the gate religiously, double-checking it each time we left my house. The closed gate from that night gnawed at me. Had the creature followed us? Had it somehow shut the gate? Or was there another explanation? The questions piled up unanswered. A week later, a neighbor on Jake's road mentioned seeing something odd near the woods, describing a shadow that moved too smoothly to be an animal. They hadn't gotten a clear look, but their dogs had reacted the same way, restless, fixated on the trees. The story spread, and soon the neighborhood was abuzz with theories. A rabid animal, a prankster in a costume, even a cryptid from local folklore. Jake and I kept quiet, unsure if sharing our experience would help or make us sound unhinged. The creature didn't reappear, at least not to us. The trail camera stopped recording anything unusual, and the dogs at Jake's house eventually settled down. But the memory of that night stayed with us, vivid and unsettling. I stopped walking alone at night, and Jake began carrying a flashlight and a knife when he checked the property. We never returned to the spot where we'd seen the creature, and I avoided looking into the woods when we drove past. Months later, I stumbled across an online forum about unexplained encounters. People shared stories of creatures that didn't fit any known species. Black, sleek, with glowing eyes and unnatural movements. Some called them crawlers, others skinwalkers, tying them to myths and legends. I didn't know what to believe, but reading those accounts made my skin crawl. Was that what we'd seen? A creature from beyond our understanding. Something that slipped through the cracks of reality. 2 years have passed, and we've moved on, living together in a new apartment far from that private road. But I still think about that night, the glowing eyes, the closed gate, the footage that defied explanation. Jake doesn't like to talk about it, but I see the way he tenses when we pass wooded areas at night. Whatever it was, it left a mark, a quiet fear that lingers in the back of my mind. I don't know if it was dangerous, if it followed us, or if it's still out there watching from the shadows. All I know is I'll never feel safe on that road again.